Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have with us a special guest who's returning. On Friday, we had on the incredible guitarist, composer, arranger, record label owner, Mr. Jay Graydon. He's back with us today for part two to share some insight into his incredible career, the people that he's collaborated with. And it was just such a pleasure having him on Friday. So much information to cover. We wanted to continue discussing this. Jay, welcome back to Jazz Talk.
Thanks, Preston.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Well, listen,
glad to be anywhere, but especially glad to be here.
Oh, thank you, my friend. Thank you. Friday, we were just talking a little bit about your work and some of the collaborations that you've done. And we covered a lot and talked about Al Jarreau and Earth, Wind and Fire. And another song by Al Jarreau that we didn't talk about, which is a, big hit for him, and it was one of my favorites, is After All. You were involved in that, or wrote that song. Tell us about that song, and because like I said, it was a really big hit for Al, and one of my personal favorites by him.
Here's the story with that song. We actually recorded it for the Breaking Away album or the Jarreau album. I forget which one, but I didn't like the track, and we had enough songs, so I said, I'll cut it again later and we'll see what happens. So I think it's on the High Crime album. I'm not sure.
It is, you're right.
So we re-recorded the track and I got a much better track. And, when I wrote the song with David, of course, it was typically David has great ideas and I turn into his editor because he's so fast with coming up with ideas. In this particular case, I'm sure it was, he started it and he was on his way and we got into 8 bars or 16 bars of the tune and I'm going, great, great, great. And I'll come up with a melody line. I'll go, let's try this melody here. And then I'll go, okay, great, let's move on. And David agreed, we're good. Now we move on. 4 or 5 bars later, I go, let's try this other chord change here. So David would go, that'll work. And I go, cool. So we put it in. We keep moving through the tune. This one may have taken a little longer to write than most, maybe 3 hours. We probably stopped for a while, cleared the palette, played the blues in G or something, and then went back to it, examined it, and kept working on it. And of course, when recording with Al and with all vocalists I record, I put them through the mill. And yesterday I showed you the vocal splicer, that incredible tool that we used for analog recording.
Yeah.
When it's impossible to punch in, when there's no space between words. And with Pro Tools now, it's not a problem. You don't need this box. But before digital and analog land, I would come up with design ideas all the time to work around problems. Anyway, I worked Al hard, as I always do. And, he didn't mind it, man. I mean, he did, but he didn't. He always knew. By then he was used to listening to the final vocal comp and always going, yeah, man, it was worth it. So I'd go, good, Al. So, by then we were really working together a lot. It was the 4th album and it was he didn't complain, and it's a great song. It is.
Yeah.
And David just plays his ass off as always. The whole band's great. I always called the best players, and I can't remember if I put any guitar parts on that tune or not, but it doesn't matter. But yeah. So it was a hit. Now, let me tell you something. This is really important. When I first started producing, I ended up producing more black acts than white acts.
I know that from your background, man. Yeah, you work with like everyone in the industry.
Well, I didn't know the bonus of it at the time. First of all, I'd always rather be in funk land than in pop land. I always liked the mix of R&B with pop. So right off the bat, I'm there, And, when I was in college, I played in funk bands all the time, man. I got that tingling feeling up my spine. Funk, man, funk and jazz and quality pop all puts that tingle up my spine. But in any case, where was I going with this? Here we go, old man memory. I know. Okay. So with After the Love Has Gone, for example, which we know is also called After the Love Is Gone. And we also talked about the fact that the melody on the Earth, Wind and Fire version is really not the melody people think the melodies, the high harmony part. If they listen to my album, Jay Graydon, Airplay for the Planet, and listen to our version of After the Love Has Gone, you'll notice what the melody is supposed to be in the chorus. Okay, so here's what I didn't realize working with Black artists when I first started producing. Well, even before I produced any big hits, After the Love Has Gone was a huge hit. And it triple charted, meaning it made it to #2 pop in Billboard, #1 pop in Cashbox, or one of the other ones, made it to #1 R&B, and made it to #1 on the AC charts, adult contemporary, okay? So now, with all these charts, you have an across-the-board hit. It's getting 3 times the amount of airplay. A ballad gets you the AC market as well. You know, you're going to get pop and R&B with a crossover Black act, just like Earth, Wind and Fire, like Benson and Al. We pulled it with Al a few times on the pop charts. But you get 3 times the amount of airplay, 3 times the amount of sales, and 3 times the exposure. What a gift.
That's incredible.
You know, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't think of it until a couple of years after the Love Has Gone. I don't know why it didn't cross my mind, but it didn't. So that's the story with that. I was going to tell you something about Dolly Parton, and you can always come back to Giroux anytime you want, you know, or any of the other acts. It's up to you. Let me tell you this Dolly Parton story. So the golden rule in the publishing business is when a song is written by outside writers, which in this case, the song was Here You Come Again, written by Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, old friends of mine, great writers. Barry Mann, by the way, was an artist at one point. He's the guy that recorded Who Put the Bump in the Bump, Shabomp, Shabomp? Who Put the Ram in the Ramalama Ding Dong? You might be too young to know that song. But that song was a bet with another writer that they could each write a tune in 45 minutes that was good. Well, Barry won that battle because his song was the hit. All right, so Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil wrote Here You Come Again. And ironically, I was booked on the date with Dolly. Dean Parks was the arranger and the other guitarist, and Foster was on piano, Keltner on drums, and I think Abe Laboriel on bass. When I was booked for that date, because we always book the A players like a month in advance, the week before, I had 2 other sessions with the same song. One I arranged. Now, this broke the publishing rule. And the publishing rule is only one artist is allowed to record a song. You can't have 3 different artists record the song, especially in the same week. You got to wait to see if the song's a hit. If it's a hit, nobody can touch it for a year or 2. And then it's just going to be album cut. It's not going to be a single because there was already a big hit. You know, I wonder if there was ever a single that came out a year later of the same song by another artist that was a hit. I don't think so. But if someone out there knows of such a song, email me through my website, jaygraydon.com. Anyway, Preston can always find me. Okay, so here we go. Now I'm on the Dolly date. And Dolly, this was an album Dolly was making for the pop market. They were trying to cross her over. And she was freaked out that her country audience was not going to like it because when we cut the track, there was no steel guitar on it. And ironically, they added a steel guitar later on, but when they mixed it, they buried it, and you can only hear it at the very end of the fade. But it surely didn't hurt the sales of this record. Now there's more stories to this song. First of all, the song, David Foster came up with a great piano part, and some of it may have been written out in the bass line. Dean may have written it out. I don't remember. And there wasn't a lot of room. I played a very simple rhythm guitar part, and it's way back in the mix. Sometimes you can hear it. It's just a filler. What I call it fills in a couple of dents like Bondo on a car, right? So it's just there for a little bit more of the support. And I knew that's what was going to happen. But in the one section of the tune that repeats, I played a slide going from with a flanger sound, going from like sixth apart. I don't know what note I started on or ended on. I haven't examined the tune in years. I haven't listened to it, but they shoved the fader up on that one. And the reason they did, it was a little tiny hook. And it also sounded like it could be from a country guitar player because I slid it. So it could almost, I might have used a slide. I don't remember. But in any case, they brought it up as the secondary hook. So underplaying with a little key hook every once in a while is a very valuable thing. You know, you never try to overplay, you never try to add too much. You respect the song. And we were hearing Dolly sing it in the cans. And like I said, there just wasn't a lot of room. And we played with the song for what it is, because that's our job. It's not our album. It's not an instrumental album featuring any one of us. We're just the support group for a great feeling track and to come up with cool parts on the spot. So that's what we did. And anyway, it was a huge hit for Dolly. It crossed over into the country market. Of course. I mean, it brought her into the pop market. That changed everything for her. It just opened her audience wide up. And she is the nicest chick you'd ever want to meet.
Yeah.
What you see on TV is what you get with Dolly. When you're in person or she does anything on TV, she's the same person. And I think she grew up with a lot of brothers or something.
Yeah.
But she knows how to hang with guys. She knows how to hang with the musicians.
Yeah.
And accidentally, one of her incredible bosom kind of fell out of her dress. And she's laughing it off while she's shoving it back up, you know, and working it all out, you know. And we got a pretty good look, you know. And she just cracked up. She doesn't care. She cared less, man. She's one of the guys, you know.
Yeah.
She's one of the guys with an incredible rack.
You know, one of the things you just made me think of, her song, you know, her song, I'll Always Love You. You know, once Whitney Houston got a hold of that, that song just blew up. And I'm sure Dolly was happy about that as well.
Absolutely. You know? It sold 14 million albums. You want to know a story on that song?
Talk to me about it. Share it.
All right. Since David Foster and I are like brothers, I know the inside of everything that he's ever done, and he knows the inside of everything I've done. Now, there's some things we can't talk about, and there's some things we can. And actually, he made this story public in his documentary, but I'll get down to the finite details. Now, Clive Davis, I got to hand it to Clive. The guy pulled hit after hit after hit.
He did. Yeah.
He's not a musician. He really doesn't musically know what's going on. He reads things real well. He reads
has a good
other
business
people.
sense. He has a good business sense.
Oh, man, that goes without saying.
Mm-hmm.
I got to respect the guy. I've worked with him. But I mean, he really is the executive producer, and he wants everything to be the way he wants it. I disagreed with him on something, but it was in the fade of a song. And he says, you hear that lick Dion singing? It was a Dionne Warwick album I produced. You hear that lick at the very end of the fade? He says, I want to hear that. I said, Clive, I don't want to go back and remix the song just for a tail end of the lick. And the track stops 2 beats later. I'd have to slam the fader down. You're still not going to hear it. And anyway, let that slide. So David, after he cut the track, he made a DAT of the track with vocal. He had the track and a rough lead. No, it was, I don't know if it was a rough lead or if the vocal was a final. But in any case, he sent it to Clive. And since Whitney's such a great singer, her first pass would be great. It's not like she's going to have to sing songs. I would not have to work her hard, believe me when I tell you that. I've heard her live. Her pitch is insane. Her phrasing, everything. She's like somebody that comes along. She's like an Ella. She's like a Sarah Vaughan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she falls into the class of those 2 ladies who preceded her, who were my favorite. Nancy Wilson, another just incredible singer. Not Dee Dee Bridgewater now is like, you know, and we're talking in the top echelon, right? All right. So Clive's got this DAT tape, and it's just a track. There's no overdubs on it. There's no strings. There's no extra guitars. There might not be any guitars. There wasn't extra little flavorings that David likes to overdub. And David finished the record with all those overdubs. And then when he turned it in, Clive says, you know, I've been walking around with this DAT in my pocket and I've been playing it of the rough mix and the one pass vocal, I'm assuming. And he says, I'm going to release this. Him and David got into a screaming fight. And Clive said to him, before we never speak to each other again, why don't we just hang up and just let it be? And well, I got to tell you, Clive, whatever version would have been released, even if it was the other version, all I can say is we know it sold 14 million albums, maybe singles. I don't remember. I remember seeing the 14 platinum discs in a plaque at Foster's studio. And anyway, I mean, the song was a big hit, way bigger than Dolly's would have ever been, than Dolly's was. And she did the song justice, man. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
What a loss, man, to have her gone.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
So soon. You know, Jay, I wanted to also ask you about some other collaborations. One of my favorite, man, is when you work with Steely Dan. Wanted to talk about Peg, your solo on that, man. That was nice. Tell us about that, man, and working with
will. Okay. First of all, I'd already seen the chart laying around in Village Studio A. You know, since I was working 20 dates a week in 5 days, I was always running around, you know, studio to studio, and sometimes music would be sitting on a music stand. And I just happened to see it was Peg, arranged by Larry Carlton, who basically sketches out Donald's ideas, but it's left pretty much open, except for sometimes there'll be lines written.
Right.
In any case, I saw the chart and I'm going, gee, Steely Dan tune, interesting. And when I started talking to people, the word got out in the street. There was like 4 or 5 guitarists and they still didn't have a solo they liked. Well, I was co-producing an album with Steve Barry for a country act, and I can't remember the guy's name. It was Jim something. And I was doing guitar overdubs, and Steve Barry's engineer was a guy named Roger Nichols, who also engineers for Steely Dan. Plus, Roger and I had become good friends because we were into flying radio-controlled gliders. So, and also he was into race cars, and I was into that. And we were both real technical guys, and we were always talking about video machines and all these different tools we could get to clean up the video and all this stuff. Anyway, I'm doing the date, overdubbing guitars, and Roger says, you know, man, I know you're a really good guitar player, man, and Steely Dan is having trouble finding a guitar player to get a solo they like. He says, I'm going to recommend you. And I said, hey, man, everybody wants to play in a Steely Dan record. That's the top of the heap.
Yeah.
If you play in a Steely Dan record, man, I mean, you can pat yourself on the back and it's okay, you know? So anyway, I go in there and to me, it's just another record date. You know, of course, I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to play for what the song asks for. And Donald and Walter are good producers. And for about the first hour and a half, I played my dig me, semi-jazz pop, pretty stuff, because the changes go C major 7 to B2 over G. Now, C major 7's a pretty chord, and B2, let me start over with the chord changes. C major 7 to G2 over B. Now, a G2 over B is a very pretty chord. The third's in the bass. It's got the second in the voicing. It's very pretty. So both those chords are pretty chords. So I'm playing pretty stuff, melodic stuff. I'm not playing any dominant 7 stuff anywhere. No blues stuff. And then Donald says, think blues. And I said, think blues. Let me think. Okay, on the C major 7th chord, dominant 7ths are out because it's got the major 7 in the chord, which is a B, so I can't play B flats. But on the G2 over B, there's no 7th. So I can play dominant 7ths on that chord and make it bluesy on that chord. And that was the key to the events. But I still got bluesy sometimes on the C major 7
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't playing licks. I was hanging on, man. I was hanging on ready to crash into a brick wall, which I did a bunch of times
Wow.
because I was just going for it. I'd just close my eyes and just go for it. And I worked my way up and down the neck 3 times. And in doing so, I was playing some pretty stuff, some dominant stuff, a little bit of pretty stuff. Then it got more dominant as it went along. And when the date, then I did the fills at the end of the song. And then when the date was over, Donald and Walter are very laid back. A minimum amount of words are spoken. You know, these guys are geniuses, man. They were English majors at Columbia. You know, I mean, or I think, you know, history, I don't know, whatever their majors were, these were serious cats. It was hard for me to get them to laugh, but I'll tell you a story that where I did get them to laugh, both of them, in a minute. So I'm done with the session. I walk out the door. Oh, I said, hey, play me some of the other solos first. And I listened to some of the other solos and I said, I see why they didn't really use them. Some of them were okay, but none of them were portraying this blues thing they wanted, really. So, and look, I'm not putting these guys down. All the solos were good. You know, it was just a matter of taste to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the blues thing. So when I split, I didn't know if I was the keeper or not. And here's something right off the bat that everybody, any studio player needs to know. If you don't think you're going to get replaced sometime in your career, you are wrong. You're going to get replaced and get used to it. Don't let it bother you. The best have been replaced. I've replaced Carlton. Carlton's replaced me. I've replaced Dean Parks. Dean Parks has replaced me. You know, this happens, man. And, you know, get used to it. It's the decision of the producer, not mine, you know. But, you know, if I was getting replaced all the time, I wouldn't have been working. So this isn't a normal occurrence, but it happens. So anyway, when I left, I didn't know if they were going to guy number 8 or not. You know, they didn't say anything to me. But I walk out of there like, all right, whatever. I'm cool. I did my gig. I got paid my double scale, and let's hope it works out. I hear it on the radio about 2 months later, and there's my solo. And then the phone started ringing off the hook, and everybody's going, man, there's no licks in that solo. It's not typical at all. And then I go into my rap, man. Look, I was hanging on by 5 milliseconds, ready to crash into a brick wall, which I did sometimes. So I just shut my eyes and went for it. I just went for it. Let my brain and my hands do what they felt like doing at the moment. And I literally did not know what I was going to play next at any time. I was, okay, I'm in a dominant scale coming down the neck. Oh, stay dominant, stay down. Okay, pretty note, stay down, play, okay. You know, this is the way my brain and hands are working it out. I'm not blatantly thinking about it, but I can tell that's what was going on in my head in the background.
Yeah.
But I got to play. I got to play. Hands, brain, work like you do. This is your job. So anyway, that's the story.
Interesting.
Oh,
interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you also work with jazz great, one of the most prolific composers in jazz, the great Wayne Shorter. I think he was on that recording that Steely Dan did in 1977, if I'm not mistaken. Is that where you work with him on that recording?
No. I
Okay.
worked with him on an album he did that Jim Price produced.
Oh.
The Fake Beer. I'm done with alcohol. Fake beer.
You're fine, buddy. You're good. You're good.
Hey, look, if it was alcohol or not, what's the difference? I'm done. In 71, my drinking days are over.
Oh boy, you were too funny.
I was always a functional juicer, a sipper, you know. As a matter of fact, I brought a 6-pack to the Peg solo. Probably drank 3 or 4. Yeah, man, it was night dates. And on night dates, I'd sip beers. They didn't care.
As long as you can do the job, right?
That's right. As long as you can play, man, what's the difference? There's a lot of guys that wouldn't play, you know, that only played if they smoked weed. When they didn't smoke weed, they sounded horrible.
Wow.
You know, Ed Green used to have an extra floor tom just to roll joints on. And it didn't matter who the date was for. It's cold in my room, man. My nose is running. Yeah. It's not blow. That's been many years since I've smelled that medicinal, ugly smell. Anyway, as you can see, I'm an open book.
I love it, man. This is great.
Hey, come on, man. You know, it's what it is.
Yeah.
So on the Wayne Shorter record, it was Jim Price producing. And I had known Jim. I started doing my earliest record dates for Jim, Union dates, in probably 1970. And I was on the Joe Cocker album, I Can Stand a Little Rain.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, on that last vocal where Joe, you know, was trying to sing the voice in falsetto and it's crackling and waving, there was 14 other tracks of vocals that Jim put together. He was like me, worked singers hard. All the last notes were in tune and normal, but he wanted to go with the strange one. And brilliant idea, because it's as much of a hook as anything in the song. So my hat's off to Jim for that. So Jim produced a Wayne Shorter album after the Joe Cocker album. And I was in the rhythm section he always used. It was me, Dave McDaniel on bass, who I got involved with us, Don Poncher, who got me involved, and Dave involved. And it was typically us three. I don't know if, I think Don played on some songs, Poncher. I know Dave did. I'm credited on a song for bass. And this just goes to show you how screwed up credits get. It goes through the chain of the producer, some assistant for the artist or the producer. Then it goes to the record company person. And who knows how things get messed up.
Yeah.
But this is a big issue because I'm with a company named TEG that collects neighboring rights. And for any of you studio musicians out there that have done a ton of record dates, contact me through my website, because I'll bring you into this group. The royalties pay so much higher through Dennis than any other way to collect. But the problem with collecting is when credits are misnamed. I've worked out two ways around it, and Dennis thinks it's going to work, and we're going to find out real soon, because there's so many albums we're on, especially Motown, where there's no credit or just a general credit. It's got to attach to a song, or my ideas will hopefully work. In any case, I was credited for playing bass on the Wayne Shorter song. I played guitar, I didn't play bass.
Right.
It was Dave. Of course it was Dave. Now, I haven't heard the record in years, and I have no idea what I played. If you if you've ever, burned a CD or something, send me the album. I'll listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what I played, and Wayne wasn't there. I can't think. I don't know if I ever actually met Wayne in a room. I'm trying to remember. He's such a good player.
He's a genius too, man. I mean, all the stuff
man.
Art Blakey, Weather Report, and the Miles Davis group from the 60s, all that stuff Wayne composed.
He survived all that too, man.
Yeah.
But good for him.
Yeah.
I hear he's in a little ill health. I hope he's all right. I don't know the story.
It's funny. I actually just spoke with saxophonist I had on the show yesterday, Sherman Irby, and what they found is that Wayne wasn't as sick as what many people thought. He supposedly has some type of allergy, something in his house that's causing him to be sick. So
mold?
That could be it. You know what mold will do. So
I know.
Maybe that's what it is. Something else that I really like by you, we didn't talk about it on Friday. I really like your song Roxanne, man. That's a killer.
Somebody else said that in another interview.
Yeah, the vocals. The vocals of your guitar stuff working that is awesome. I love that.
Listen to this. I did another interview. I mean, I'm doing interviews, man, like 4 and 5 a week. I'm doing every interview I can get my hands on to pitch the famous E. Rhodes.
Yeah.
And of course, to pitch my material. And of course, to pitch my website that I'm going to start, an instructional website, not a website, YouTube channel that I'm going to start in about 4 months. I'm very technical, not just on guitar, but for recording techniques. And I've learned so much stuff over the years, like that box that I invented with my buddy Ian.
Right.
I'm going to teach all kinds of stuff. So that's why I'm doing all these interviews. And here's the deal. Roxanne, the guy that interviewed me on earlier in the week, a cat named Tom in England, kept saying, I have played that song for 2 days straight. And then after the interview, I emailed him and I said, "Are you still playing the song?" He says, "I am. I can't get enough of it." Now you mention it, Preston.
Yeah, man. That's a hot tune. I'm telling you.
Okay. The singer is Warren Weeby. David and I found him, as well as a piano player named Bill Cantos, who's another great singer, who I wrote Roxanne with. We found those two guys on a casual for our manager's wedding, our lawyer manager at the time wedding. And David said, "Listen to these guys, man." I said, "Hey, man, right." Well, David really tried to do his best to involve Warren on as much as he could. Poor Warren had mental issues, man. He had bad brain wiring. As sadly, man, three of the, almost every male in his family had taken themselves out.
Oh, wow.
And I got really close to Warren because I dealt with depression a few times, and thankfully I got out of it. And I would talk to him in depth about this because he needed a friend. He couldn't talk to this with anybody else. And he says, "Man, Jay, I don't like taking these meds. I take these meds, I get lethargic." I said, "Warren, I understand. I had to take them, but I didn't have to take them for my whole life like you have to." And I said, "Warren, if you don't take them, you know what's going to happen. You're going to slip into one of those modes, man, and you may do something that you don't want to do, really." Well, he did it. And sad, man. Anyway, we've got at least we have him. I have him on 2 songs on my Airplay for the Planet album, Roxanne, and another tune. Da 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 da. I can't remember the title. Da da da. I don't remember the title. Anyway, he sings his ass off on both songs. Great, great singer.
Yeah.
End of story. And I'm glad you like the song, man.
I love this song. I've been checking it out too. Maybe not every day like the guy in England, but I like it. I wanted to talk to you about your collaboration with Alice Cooper, man. How did you end up working with him? That was interesting.
David Foster was producing Alice, and he was a big Doonesbury fan. And now I have to back up and tell you this story. We did a record for Gary Trudeau, who wrote Doonesbury, and we were doing an album for a charity. And he found a singer, and ironically, his name was Jimmy, for Jimmy Thudpucker. He was supposed to be playing the part of Jimmy Thudpucker.
Right.
And Gary and I got along. We wrote a tune together for the record called Fretman Sam, and Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn were on the sessions, and I love those guys, man. I recently communicated with Steve, man. We're old pals, man. Great guy, man. Anyway, so when we were doing, I'm always making my stupid jokes. You can see it's hard to shut me up. I know when to shut up and when not to shut up. And when the session's loose with cats like this and everybody's having fun, I don't shut up. So I kept telling Gary, I said, man, he would be kidding me. He says, "Hey, try a wah on this." I go, "Man, no, man. This is the bicentennial year. I'm way beyond that now, man. I'm into the tricentennial sound, man. I'm like 100 years from now, pal. So don't talk to me about 1976, right?" But I'm just kidding around.
Right.
But he liked all this. So he said, "I'm going to put you in the comic strip." I get a call from my dad one day. He says, "You're in the comics." And it lasted for a week. And then I was an ongoing character that would come back.
That's funny.
And he called me Wah Graydon in the articles.
Yeah.
And there's a guy named Wah Watson. And now Wah's a very good friend of mine. I work with him all the time. And I was really worried he'd get bugged. Well, I ran into Wah on a session. Like I bump into him at least once a week on a session somewhere. And I went up to Wah and I said, "Hey, man, this wasn't my idea." And he says, "Didn't hurt my money."
That's great, man. That's great.
I love Wah. Poor Wah passed, man. Another one of our era gone, man. I got to do the documentary on our era. I've got to make it happen. Got to get somebody with a do-gooder organization, man, to cough up $1.2 million to do it.
Yeah.
They don't make money. It's got to be a do-gooder organization.
Yeah.
Back to Alice Cooper. So that's why the Doonesbury connection came up. And Alice loved Doonesbury, and he said, wah, wah. I walk in the door and he goes, wah, wah. I said, hey, Alice, man, and I told him the whole story with wah, wah and all that. In any case, I'm sure I played guitar in a couple tunes, and I think I also I programmed synthesizer for Foster. I was a go-to guy for synthesizer programming, especially for David, because I knew what he wanted. And I had I had all the synthesizers of the era, and I knew how to get really cool sounds with all the effects. Man, I'm loaded with, tons of effect stuff that's now like museum pieces. Yeah. But that was a great time with Alice. Great time.
Yeah, good stuff.
He also let us stay at his beach house for a week when David and I wrote half the songs for the Airplay album. That's an album we made as artists in 1979. It stiffed in the States, but was a smash in Japan. And the Japanese say, we are the beginning of a style called West Coast pop. We don't take credit for that. You got to add Toto. You got to add Chicago. You got to add Ambrosia. You got to add Blood, Sweat, and Tears. All the Steely Dan. The Japanese thought, this one cat in particular, but who happens to be a very good friend of mine. But anyway, so Alice let us use his pad for a week. So he must have liked what we were doing for him. Yeah, beach pad. There was 2 fires going on. I remember that, man.
Yeah.
Bad fires on both sides of the valley. You could see the smoke going over the ocean. Anyway, go ahead, man.
Yeah, just so many artists that you've worked with. Also, Debarge, Who's Holding Donna. That's another great tune. That's one of his best known tunes too, because you worked with the group as well as Al. But tell us about that collaboration, man. How did that come about?
Okay, Steve Barry, who I was talking about earlier, was a producer, and he was at Motown. They brought him in as an A&R guy. And L is a great writer and a great singer. And there's other talent in that group too. But L, man, he's a great singer and a sweetheart and a great writer, man. Just love everything about that cat.
Yeah.
Anyway, David and I had written 3 songs for a Gene Wilder album called The Woman in Red. And we demoed them up like Muzak. What we did is we wrote the 3 songs in one night or in 2 nights, and we banged it out real quick with drum machine and piano and maybe synth playing the melody. That's what we did. David gave it to Gene, and Gene, I guess, didn't dig the stuff because Stevie Wonder ended up getting called for the soundtrack, and he actually recorded a song that I recorded with Stevie with Dionne Warwick that didn't make it on Dion's album, but there's another tune with Stevie that made it on Dion's album that I produced. The album's called Friends in Love, and that's really a good album, and that's another story. But anyway, so 2 of my friends came over, Cliff Magnus and Glenn Ballard, who were producing Jack, who was the guy that was a great scratch golfer, Jack. He was on a TV soap opera, good-looking guy, Jack. God, I can't remember his name. This bugs me. He's a friend of mine. It'll come to me. Anyway, that's it. Great guy.
Yeah.
I used to call him.
He used to be on General Hospital as Frisco.
Right, and he had a couple of hits. Now, Cliff and Glenn.
All I need.
Right.
It's just a little more time.
Right.
Yeah.
But then he had another hit with a song that David and I wrote, and I think Glenn wrote the lyrics. And what happened was Glenn and Cliff came over for songs, and I said, well, David and I have these 3 songs we wrote, and nobody's cut them, so we'll give you a pick. They wanted a ballad, and Who's Holding Down Now is kind of a ballad. It's a groove ballad, but anyway, so I played them the tape, and L happened to show up to do vocals with me that night, right when I was playing what ended up being Who's Holding Donna Now. And L walks in the door and says, I want to record that song. And Cliff and Glenn go, wait a minute. We love that song. We want to record it. I said, guys, my artist just walked in the door. He wants to record it. I got to record it with him. But here's two others, and they loved another one, which was a hit. And I can't remember the name of it.
Wow.
But so Randy Goodrum, very good friend of mine, who's my partner in Jar with our Jar album, Scene 29. And we're coming out with another one in about 6 months or so. Jar Code, it will be called, but we are Jar, Jar, small a, large, capital J, small a, capital R. If you like Steely Dan, you're going to like that record. Trust me. I think it's the best record I've ever done, ever. My guitar playing is never going to get better than that.
Wow.
And their tunes are very creative. Check it out on my website.
I definitely will.
So anyway, man, it's cold in here. It's like 55 in here, and I've had the heat on for 20 minutes. Anyway, okay, so now Randy Goodrum moves into town because I told him to. I said, get out of Nashville. You have good pop sense. I'll get you work. So I took Who's Holding Donna Now. I took the track to him. I said, Randy, write the lyric. You're a great lyricist. He was on his way over to my house to play me the lyric and sing what he had. I don't know if we'd cut the track yet or not, but it doesn't matter. When he was on his way over, he turned around and went back home. And when he walked in, his wife, Gail, said, you don't like the lyric, do you? And he says, yep, you know me. So he rewrote it, and it came up to be with Who's Holding Donna Now. And he wrote it in an hour. He's so prolific, it's insane.
In an hour.
So he probably got the idea. He probably got the idea on the way to my house. So we then cut the track, and I must say that track layers itself. Everything is crystal clear in that track. It was so easy to mix. I didn't have to do hardly anything level writing wise. And I loved, and El sang his ass off. Yeah. El has such good ears. He says, we're on track 19 now, aren't we? He could actually hear the difference in the cue system of the way the cue playback sounded on these individual tracks, which is very hard to do. Very hard. And he'd say, okay, we're on track 19 now. I said, man, quit it. I know it. Yeah, I know you know every track I'm on. Don't worry about that. Just sing your ass off as always. Yeah. And he did. He was painless, man. And he didn't mind me working him hard either. He agreed. That's incredible.
That's so incredible. Some more collaborations. You did some stuff with Hall & Oates. Tell me about that.
Daryl and John, great guys. Yeah. Great guys, man.
They're into that Philly sound too. They're really influenced by Gamble and Huff and those guys.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And yeah, Daryl came over to my house and hung out when I was making when I was making Steve Kipner's album or Mark Jordan's album, one of the two. And those were early albums I produced, and they're really fun albums, man. Here's a funny one for you. Mark Jordan's album, Blue Desert, was nominated as the best guitar album that didn't sell. It's not a guitar album. It's a vocal album. I just ended up playing solos on almost every song, which brings up a story where I asked Larry Carlton to play a solo on one of these songs because I'm playing too much. After 3 hours, he says, I'm not right for this. It's not working. You play it. Once again, there's one of those times when you get replaced. I've been there. I told that to Foster one time after 3 hours. I'm not coming up with what you need. Get somebody else. I'm not giving you what you need. So anyway, Daryl came over and actually had an idea on one song we ended up using. And I said, thanks, Daryl. He was just hanging out with me and Foster and whoever else was over there. And I would show up at their record dates sometimes because I knew when David was producing them. And that's how Airplay got the record deal, because their manager, David played their manager a demo we did of me singing a song called Should We Carry On that's on the Airplay album. Their manager was, who's the cat that married Mariah Carey? He was the chairman of CBS.
Oh, gosh, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
Discovered Mariah and married her.
Was it Tommy?
Tommy
LaPuma?
No, Tommy
Montana? Mottola. That's it.
Mottola.
Mottola. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tommy Mottola. And anyway, he got us the airplay deal, but he was their manager at the time. And I'd walk in on sessions and hang out with the guys. And of course, I'm always complimenting them for their great writing and great singing. And, you know, and then David hired me on a few tunes. I think Daryl and John wanted me to play on them. So, yeah, once again, painless, great guys to work with, great music, everything great.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you, Jay, about you forming your own record label, Sonic Thrust labels. What made you do that? Was it just to have that creativity to be able to do your own thing? What made you form that label?
I was making vanity albums. You know, look, it was all by you know, the last album I did as an artist was Planet 3 with Cliff Magnus and Glenn Ballard. We were on Capitol, and I made the deal through Steve Barry, and God, it was David Berman. He was the chairman, and Steve Barry was head of A&R. They just wanted great tunes for Heart and some other bands, so I wrote them with Cliff and Glenn because the three of us have a pop rock sense together. They said, "You guys sound like a band. We want to sign you." So we finished the album. It's called Planet 3, Airplay for the Planet. No, Planet 3, I don't know what, Music for the Planet. And the week we were done and played it for the record company, David Berman got fired. They cleaned house. Everybody was fired. The new head of the company didn't want to have anything to do with any acts, any other previous A&R guy signed or head of the company, unless they were smash hits. But it got released in Japan because I have a career over there with Airplay. Airplay was huge over there. And this album did incredibly well over there, huge. So I toured a few times in the 90s, but by the time the early 90s came along, I thought, man, look, I just want to make albums that are musical. So that's when I did Jay Graydon, Airplay for the Planet, and then the Bebop album, and then the Surf album for fun, for a recording studio test. And then a couple other things I did. I can't remember. Past to present, a bunch of old demos from our era. I knew that the record deals I'm going to get were going to be really minimal, and they'd be in Japan and Europe, and I wouldn't have a deal anywhere else. So I had pockets of Europe. I had Japan. They all did well there, you know, sold really well. But I needed to release in the States, so I set up my label up for that. So we just sold it through CD Baby, downloads in the CDs. That's the reason for forming it. And for Jar, we formed we formed Jar Records. I don't remember what it's called, but doesn't matter. It's through my website. You can find it there. You know, just to have it. That's the reason.
That's great.
Just for an outlet, because I wasn't going to get any releases in the States. No company would sign me. There's no reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, wanted to talk about your collaboration with a very special singer, with a talent, Celine Dion. What was it like? I think you and David did some stuff with her and her husband.
I never played on any of her records, but I did a live concert with her for like 4 nights in Japan.
Oh, wow.
It was David Foster All-Star Tour, and there was a bunch of acts, and Celine was one of them. So I got to be tight with her. We hit it off as pals, and you know, her husband kind of was protecting her against from anyone else, but it's like he didn't need to do that. She's one of the guys too. You know what I'm saying? So sweet lady. I submitted some songs over the years to her, but whoever was producing nixed them. It's too bad I never pulled a hit with her. It is, but I wish it would have. It would have been nice, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you: are there any? You pretty much have had quite an illustrious career. Are there any artists, Jay, that you wanted to work with that you never got a chance? Because, like I said, when I look at who you've worked with, man, it's just about everyone. But I'm thinking, I wonder if there's someone that Jay never got an opportunity to work with that he wanted to. Any particular artist that comes to mind?
Stevie Wonder, but he doesn't need me. I told him, I said, Stevie, you changed my life. When I heard the album Music of My Mind, you changed my life. I'm a closet jazzer, and I'm a pop guy, and I'm an R&B guy. And I said, you were using jazz changes all over the place. And I was writing out every song on the next 10 albums you did just to see how you'd get to A, B, C, and D, because there was no logic to your chord changes. They
Right.
were brilliant. You'd use a common tone to tie in this stuff. And I just wanted this brilliance to rub off on me. And, you know, I mean, I said to him, man, it would be my dream. But I said, look, man, you know, you don't need any help. What am I going to do for you that you can't do for yourself?
Right.
Nothing. You know, I was thinking in the back of my mind, I'd make the records a little tighter than him. His records were a little loose. But hey, man, it's Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want, man. I'm going to eat it up.
Yeah. Yeah. What about someone like Prince or Miles Davis, working with someone like that?
Okay. Miles Davis was a dick.
I hear that all the time.
You know, I got a great story, man. Since this is a jazz channel, pretty much, you're going to love this story.
Share it, man. Share it.
Okay, here we go. David and I we got called to write a tune with Herbie Hancock in 1980, and we ended up co-producing it with Herbie. And so in this studio, in the other room right over here is the piano ISO. And when Herbie comes over, I said, listen, man, come on, man. You're one of my favorite pianists of all time. Of course, Miles is Miles, you know, and Tony Williams on the
Oh,
Four and More album at age 17.
everyone
You've
talks
got to
about that
be,
recording. Everyone, and
you've
it's
got,
funny that you brought that up, Jay. Every single person I talked to just says the
okay,
first time they heard Tony, and Pat Metheny talks that too. He says the first time I heard Tony Williams on Four More, him like he says, you know, Miles is great, but who is this drummer? You know, everyone's blown away by it. So
17 years old. Okay. So, and I said, Herbie, I said, man, you played incredibly well on that record. Miles, I think that was his peak for his bebop playing. All the tunes were up tempo. Now, what some people don't know is there's another version of this album called the Complete 1964 Recordings. Because over a couple of days, I think, the second half of the album was all ballads. When they released it as the Complete Recordings, they released Four and More as one album, and then the Complete Recording was all the ballads, right?
yeah,
The
yeah.
collection, right? Okay. So Greg Matheson and I, one of my best friends who I helped as a producer and a studio musician, I helped get him in for both things, and arranger. We went to college together. We still talk like every week. Great jazzer, great player, great everything. Okay. When we were in college, we used to listen to the Four and More album all the time. We were just so glued to that album. And Greg's dad was a bebopper, and he just loved jazz, and he turned me on to so much great stuff. It was a great education, and he's a great cat, man. Everything was the greatest. So we're listening to the Four and More album, and one of the songs is Walking. Dun, 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 right? Okay,
Yep.
but it's real upstairs. Dun, 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 dun. I'm singing like shit as usual. But anyway, man, it's way up there, right? Okay, so Greg and I are clapping along in the tune, and we noticed that at some point, we both noticed this, the time got turned around. It got turned around and got turned upside down. And one was now what four was. It was either that or it got turned around by an eighth note. But we're banging our hands and clapping the time hard, because when we heard this, we go, that can't be right. Let's just keep listening to it and clapping. But it got turned around. So after I made the intro to Herbie, I said, now, after talking about the Four and More album, I said, I told you what I'm telling you, I told Herbie. I said, now the question for you guys is, did you cats ever get lost? He laughed so hard, he fell off the piano bench. He's on the floor. And he laughed for 30 seconds. And then he finally gets up and he says, Jay, we got lost all the time. And I said, great. I'm glad you guys are human, Because when you're working with a drummer and he plays a fill or he plays a solo, if he's a real fancy drummer, he's going to turn the time around. And unless you're really counting, or unless he sets up the end of his solo to really let you know where one is, a lot of times people aren't going to agree on one. And I don't want to count like strict time while he's playing his solo. I want to listen to his solo.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping he's going to set me up. But if it's a cat that I know that's going to get tricky and never set me up, this is when we were jamming, right? Always for jam sessions, which we did all the time, when we, in the early days. So anyway, yeah, Herbie says, man, look, when we got lost. And I said, well, who would say where one is? And, and he says, Jay, you know the answer to that. Somebody says it's one, and that's where one is. In the meantime, you play along, and in my case, I'd be comping, or if I'm playing a solo, it didn't matter. I'd finally find out where one is. But if I'm comping, I really needed to know where one is. But I'd comp along, and then as soon as it was clear, like within 4 bars, it would be clear. And everybody that's listening to this show will agree with me. Everybody gets lost when somebody takes the time out. And another thing that can do it is, God, man, another thing that can do it is when you start grouping in triplets into groups of 2, dot, 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 and 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 you take it so far, you're across the bar line, and you don't know how many bar lines you've crossed, and you don't know where one is unless you're counting the whole time.
Right.
And I wouldn't. So I just, with guys I knew were going to get tricky, I counted. But it isn't as much fun. Just let that triplet figure go. And then drummer, please give me a hint where one is. Like on the end of 4, on Tony's solo in 4, he goes dot, 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 or something like that to let everybody know where one's going to be. He stopped his solo and he gave a lead in. So that way nobody would get lost and they came back in on the head, And his drum solo is brilliant on that tune. And another thing that he did, sometimes he'd turn the ride around. Instead of going ding, ding, da, ding, ding, da, ding, he'd go ding, da, ding, ding, da, ding, ding, da, ding. And he'd turn it around within phrases. So sometimes if you weren't really paying attention and somebody does something tricky, or you go into a multi-rhythm figure that's, going across the bars, you could get screwed up and lost that way too. But man, I know I got too deep into this.
Oh, this is good.
All the cats that are watching this that love that album are gonna go, man, right? There's nobody that's gonna disagree with me. I'm telling you right now. If they never got lost, they're not human.
All musicians, it's funny, everybody talks about, that group. And sometimes Herbie would say we would get lost often. And he says Miles, with his playing, could sense the link. And he would be the one to sort of bring us all together again. But Herbie told some interesting stories. Like, this is one time he was comping behind Miles and he hit a wrong note. And he was so afraid. He said, oh my gosh, he said, Miles is going to fire me. I'm in trouble. And he says, Miles came up from behind him and said, that was fine what you did, when Herbie played the wrong note. But he says Miles played something to fit Herbie's wrong note, and it just made it beautiful. He said that was his genius of, he was like a great listener, one of the ultimate listeners,
We all do that. If you don't do that, you're not listening. Yeah. I'm waiting for inspiration from anyone, and everyone else is waiting for inspiration for anyone. Like when a solo stops on my bebop album, on a song called My Hot Girth, that's an anagram for I've Got Rhythm.
Yeah.
Its rhythm changes. At the end of Branford Field's solo, he ends the solo going da da, and I had no preconceived idea of what I was going to play. And that's the beginning of a head to a tune that goes da da, da da, da da, da da, right? Okay, so he plays da da and I play da da, da da, and then I take off. So his idea was me listening, thinking, great, he just gave me an idea. So now I'm not going to start with anything that's preconceived. I played off him right away. And cats do that all the time. And anybody with ears will do that. Here's a bunch of Miles stories for you. You've heard some of them.
Oh yeah.
Well, a few of them are firsthand, like from Herbie and from other cats. Okay, Marcus Miller. I
Oh
was
yeah.
talking to Marcus Miller. Okay, I was talking to Marcus Miller, and I said, Marcus, you got to tell me if this story is real. And I said, okay, the story goes, you're playing Fender. It was when Miles got in. Well, he was of the era when it was the electronic stuff, right? Basically just open, free, one chord, free for all. Okay, so Marcus is playing the groove and grooving along, and Miles standing like 30 feet away from him, he's going like this. He's pointing down at the floor, like, and Marcus is going, man, what? So Marcus starts making his way over to him, and Miles is still going like this, I'm like, get over here, it's pointing down. So Marcus finally gets over there, and Marcus says, no, Marcus is playing, man. He's got to be listening, because it's a fusion stuff where anything can happen at any time. It can go anywhere. He's got to pay attention, right? So he says, Miles, what do you want? And Miles says, dig my shoes,
Yeah,
man.
that's a
Dig
true
my
story.
shoes.
That's a true
Have you heard
story.
that story?
I've heard him tell that story. Yeah, he's checking out his
Okay.
shoes, man. He was like
Then
that.
he says, I can get you a deal on these shoes. He says, I bought 10 pair of 5 different shoes. I can get you in this color. And then like Marcus is going, yeah, cool, Miles. Like, can I go back to like saying, dig my shoes, man? He wouldn't let him alone.
Oh, that's funny. I've heard that one. That's a good one.
Okay, here's some more. He comes up behind Herbie one day and he says, during a tune on the gig, and he says, whenever you get an idea, lay out. Just sticking with him, okay? When Herbie went over there to interview for the gig, this is from Herbie, he sat there and played, man, and, typical Miles response, nothing. And nothing was being said. So he walks out, he's getting ready to go out the door, and Miles says, be at the gig tomorrow night at 7:45. He didn't even know where the gig was. He had to find out where the gig was. Miles didn't tell him, here's a Miles story from the president of Warner Brothers Records. When they wanted to sign Miles, it was Mo Austin and Lenny Waronker, 2 really close friends of mine, the chairman and the president of Warner's. So Miles is sitting there and he's pulling the, I'm going to mess with Whitey trick, and nobody's saying anything for like 20 minutes. Nothing's being said. Those guys try to start a conversation and nothing from Miles. He tells this guy, go get my art supplies from the car. So he gets his art supplies, sets them up, starts painting like he does. And then Lenny finally started asking him some musical questions. Now, Lenny doesn't know anything about music, but he's a producer and he's been around musicians long enough where he knows some terms. So this one you probably haven't heard. So he starts talking to Lenny. And then after about, 5 minutes of talking to Lenny, Miles looks up at Lenny and says, what are you playing, man? And Lenny says, well, I'm not a musician. And Miles says, so what the fuck am I talking to you for, man? And goes back to painting.
That sounds like Miles. That sounds
he
like
signed
Miles.
with him.
Oh my gosh.
There's a bunch more I'm forgetting, man. They're endless.
Yeah.
They're endless,
He was something else.
Bless Miles for that, man. Oh, I remember. I was in a restaurant one night in Malibu, and when he was with Cicely Tyson, and the restaurant was on the pier. I can't remember the name of it. And he was living in Malibu at the time. And I just happened to be close enough when I can hear him talk. He got up out of his chair and he looked around the restaurant, jam-packed. Him and Cicely, they're standing up ready to walk out. And I could hear him say, Hollywood, shaking his head, man, like jive, man. Yeah. That was a brief encounter with Miles in person,
Wow, that's great, man. I love these Miles Davis stories.
Oh, yeah.
Jay, I wanted to ask you about some of your film work, man. Some of the things and projects you've been involved in, like the film The French Connection and Ghostbusters, and some of the other things that you've done, man. What was it like working on that? Because that's a great film. I think that was done in '74 or '75 or something like that. The French Connection, if I'm not mistaken. Earlier than that, I think '72 maybe. Yeah,
Yeah,
70,
yeah,
71, 71, 71.
right. I would have
Yeah,
been 21 at the
yeah.
end of the year. I would have been 20. Let's see. So, yeah, at the end of the year. Okay, so Don got the gig to write the music for the French Connection,
Hmm.
and there's two interesting events. One was he says, "Listen, man, there's going to be a very fast string line. I want you to play. I want you to play with the strings on guitar." Says, "I'm going to give you the music out in front because it's really difficult." And it's a good thing he does because it was difficult and it was fast. I figured out I could play the whole thing in three positions. And it was so long and so many notes, I really couldn't look down but to change the position. And I definitely memorized those phrases. So that was a challenge and it was great. And thank God it worked out great. The other
Mm.
thing was he wrote a piece that used three guitars, and each guitar was tuned a third of a semitone apart. So instead of a quarter tone apart from a half step, there was one guy on top that was in tune. The next to the guy was 33 cents flat, and the next guy was 66 cents flat. And we'd play waterfall chords, like whoever was on top would play the first one, so it'd go ding, ding, ding. But we're a third of a semitone apart, so it's bizarre as hell, and they're ringing. So this set up a tension that was really a trip. Very good writing on Don's part. Now,
Mm.
me being the technical guy and me being the first guy in LA with a strobe tuner, guys used to laugh at me, but I'd get tuned up in 5 minutes. They'd be tuning up all day and never getting tuned. Anyway, it's not that out, but anyway, I had the strobe tuner and Don knew I did, and he brought his anyway. But since the other two guitar players were Tommy Tedesco and Herb Ellis, and these cats are not technical guys, I said, "Guys, I got it. Give me your guitars." I said, "Who wants to play the top part? Tommy, do you want it?" I mean, I'm the kid here, but and always out of respect, when you walk into any record date, the senior guy sits at guitar book one. If there's two guitars and I'm the other cat, I'm sitting in two, man, because I'm not the senior guy. This is out of respect, right? So now here's two guys that are the old school heavyweights. I'm going to sit third guitar. But I asked Tommy what he wanted to do in this case because it was so bizarre. I said, "You want to be part of the bizarreness, or do you want to be the guy on top that's in tune?" He says, "I don't care. You decide." I said, "Tommy, plan, or Herb, what are you guys working at?" And we got it worked out. So I said, "The other guys, give me your guitars and I'll tune each one of you guys to the pitch Don wants you tuned to. A third of a semitone, 33 cents and 66 cents flat between a semitone." So I did. The waterfall effect happened. It was great. Now for the bad news. The film director and producer hated his music, but they did keep a fair amount of it. I'd have to go listen to the movie, watch the movie, and listen to tell you what they kept. And I would remember some of the stuff that was thrown out because I was on all the sessions.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That was almost
Um,
50 years ago, Jay. Wow, you got a great memory.
I rem Man, you're asking great questions. You're bringing up stuff. I'm gonna have to for my autobiography that I've been working on forever. I write down ideas when I think about it, but I have to watch this interview and write down a lot of this stuff we're talking about because I've
Sure.
forgotten.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. The Ghostbusters. Here's another great story. Really glad you brought this up. David Foster and I get called by Clive Davis. Okay.
Mm.
Now, first of all, my buddy Ray Parker wrote the theme,
Yeah.
and this record has made him a fortune because it's a Halloween song. It's Ghostbusters 4 is going to come out. It's been done for a year and a half, but they didn't want to release it because they wanted a theatrical release. Ray did an autobiography, did a documentary on him that's going to be released at the same time. And anyway, so what Clive wanted Air Supply to do. Oh, no, back up. Air Supply was doing a greatest hits. And Clive called David and I and said, do you guys work together and write a tune and produce it, or 2 tunes? So we did. And one of them that we came up with is pretty good. And it's actually gotten a lot of legs.
Yeah.
But there was only room for 1 signal on this greatest hits album. And it was something Jim Steinman ended up using that Clive used. But here we are sitting on this Air Supply song. And by the way, both those guys are great. Graham Russell and Russell Graham and Graham, they both have the name Graham. Hitchcock, Russell Hitchcock and Russell Graham. However it works. I'm too tired to figure it out. Anyway, great cats though. So we recorded that song and it didn't get released on any album. So on Ghostbusters, they had to have a soundtrack record because the album did so well. So they want to fill it up with Arista material. And those guys were on Arista through Clive. So out of nowhere, our songs on that album. It shows up in the album. In the movie, it leaks out of a Walkman for 7 seconds. And somebody had to point it out to me because I never heard it. And then when they did point it out to me and I listened, I go, yeah, I can barely hear it. And so that means they had to license it. But the album was out already and the movie was a hit. That means we own them for a sync license. And they said, please give us a break. Don't hit us too bad. Well, our manager, lawyer of the time, made a deal that I probably shouldn't say, 30 grand. I really shouldn't tell you how much we got, 30 grand. Anyway, I didn't mean, did I say 30 grand?
Someone's listening to this, Jay.
Right, did I mention 30 grand that we didn't get? No, that's what we got. Anyway, that was a lot back then for sync. So the good news is that the Ghostbusters album sold millions. If it would have been on the Air Supply album, it wouldn't have made as much money unless it was a hit.
Yeah.
And it's one of the songs they do live. It's one of the songs they like. So pretty cool stories, huh?
Yeah, man, fantastic. Didn't you do something, I believe, with St. Elmo's Fire, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes.
Yeah, that was another one.
Man, you know more about me than I do. Okay. That was a tune where David was hired to score the music. And once again, it needed to be filled up with songs. David wrote the theme. I remember the day he came up with the theme. I would just happen to be over there 5 minutes after he came up with it. And I said, that's great, David. That's going to work. You're going to have a hit with that. And he did.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he scored some other stuff. But we had to fill in tunes. So David and I can't remember the other cat, Peter somebody, we wrote a song as airplay. And David and I banged out the track and I did the overdubs. And I had to mix it for him because David was out of time. So we slipped in an airplay song out of nowhere. You know, we just used airplay for a name. We needed to fill up the album. So that's how it ended up on it.
Oh, that is great. Awesome.
Yeah.
So as 2020 comes to a close, what can we look forward to seeing from Jay Graydon in 2021? I know you mentioned earlier about, some things that you want to do with your websites and teaching things, but any more recordings or anything that we can look forward to for 2021?
Jar 2 will be coming out. And like I say, if you like Steely Dan, you're going to love the Jar 1 album. Jazzers, look, it's a jazzer pop record, man. I mean, it's for the cats, man. It's a little too musical for Joe Regular.
Right.
And sometimes it gets really tricky and there's surprises all over the place. And so Jar 2 will be coming out, and there's already the lead single for that song we already released a couple of years ago called Code, that's online. That's not a great representative of the rest of the record. That's kind of commercial-ish. But the rest of the album gets musical. But man, I've been so hung up doing other stuff. I feel so bad because the album's been done for years. I just have to mix it. And I'm going to have Randy do half the work because I'm now busy with other stuff. So that album will come out, whether I'll do any more albums or not. Oh, I'm going to produce a guitarist named Matteo Mancuso.
You talked about
Matteo Mancuso, who's the next Pat Metheny. Wow. This kid, go online, Matteo Mancuso.
I wrote
He's
his name down.
23 years old. Not only listen to the jazz stuff he's done, listen to the country cover tune of Brent Mason's he did. He can play country swing, he can play Django, he can play any style, but we're going to take him more in a Metheny type of direction, meaning make it a little more commercial. It's not going to be a bebop record. What's the point of that? We have to get him to a market that will sell. And he's going to be the next guitar god, I'm telling you. These
Jay,
cats only come along every 30 years, man.
Jay, you just made me think of something. Pat Metheny was saying in an interview when he made his recording Bright Side's Life in 1976. I think he was only 22, 23 at the time, and he did that one with Jocko and Bob Moses. He said he was thrust into that whole guitar thing. He said he never realized that he would be a guitar leader at such a young age because he wasn't trying to do anything like that. But during that time period, you know, there was so much creativity going on, like you said, him, Jaco Pastorius, you know, you had bands like Return to Forever, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Weather Report, you know, there was so much going on, Earth, Wind, and Fire. And that recording, he said, really set him on the map. So
he's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's ridiculous.
And as a composer, he's brilliant too. Have you heard his recording Secret Story?
I've heard a lot of his stuff. Man, I'm bad with names. Yeah. But I'm gonna go back and listen to everything he's ever done.
He's a genius, man. He really is.
I know it. I know it, man. Yeah. You know, he's such a creative cat. Yeah. I want to really try to see if I can get him to play a solo on the record with Mateo. I'm really hoping. Pat normally doesn't do this. Yeah. You know, and also that's the reason why I asked you for McLaughlin's email. I want to talk to John and see if I can get him interested. Steve Vai's going to do something with us.
Steve is great.
Oh, he's a sweetheart cat too. One of my closest friends, man. The guy is such a beautiful human being, man. Yeah. Believe me. I want to be like him when I grow up. You know, him and Ted Green, both those guys. Yeah. So anyway, but I'm going to really pay a lot of attention to this educational site because I know all you cats are going to dig this. There'll be some cool guitar stuff that I've come up with. That's another way of thinking. I'll also dissect a bunch of my solos. I'm going to teach rhythm guitar in full for you wannabe studio guitarists because 90% of the work is rhythm guitar. And I've worked out so many permutations of rhythm guitar. I'm going to teach about that in full because that's how I made a living and it's coming back. Guitar is back on pop records and it's going to go this way. It has to. It's time for it to all flip around and it's slowly happening. The machines are slowly going to go away. There'll always be some, but guitar is back on pop records, making room for young cats that want to be studio musicians to be studio musicians. And I'm going to tell you how to advertise yourself to become a studio musician. In this era where files are flying all over the internet. And believe me, it's going to be something I have to do this before I check out of here because I have so much information I've got to share. You know, you can tell I'm a wired up cat, man. My brain doesn't stop. I'm in creative land. I'm always thinking of ways to do things for the better.
Right.
You know, recording wise, technically, especially. You know,
Jay, listen, I want to thank you so much, man. This has just been so insightful. I've learned a lot. One of my most interesting interviews. I've never done two parts with someone. And as I said, you've had such an amazing career and just sitting here and sharing it, the fans will love this. But hang on, I'm about to close out the show. Okay. Well, you've heard it from the great Jay Graydon. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.